Hello, everyone, and welcome to this latest episode of Build St. Louis, the regional podcast that's capturing and sharing the very heartbeat of construction, development, and design. And my name is Kerry Smith Buck, and I am your host, and I'm president and CEO of Construction News and Review, or CNR. If you have ever wondered, as I have, how do buildings find their names, especially historic signature structures in St. Louis and elsewhere, you are in for a treat today because we have two experts from the architecture and design firm Arcturis to tell us how and walk us through the process. We're thrilled to have Judy Glick and James Butler here. Judy is the Director of Brand and Client Engagement at Arcturis. She's been in the industry since 2003. And James Butler is the Design Practice Leader for Arcturis's Brand Experience Group. And James has been in the industry for more than 10 years. So, Judy and James, welcome to this episode of Build St. Louis. We're so excited to have you with us.
We're excited to be here.
Awesome. Let's dive right in. And I want to make sure I understand and our listeners understand what is brand experience and how does that play into building naming and why is it important? Why would an architecture and interior design firm need this expertise? Tell me more about what it all means.
We are a collaborative design firm, and while we provide architecture, interior design, landscaping, lighting design, and brand experience design, something that we've been doing for the last almost 5, 6 years is doing some naming. So we will name some of the buildings that we design as well as other brands and products.
It's something that I think our listeners and I never really think about, especially if it's just a historic building in the Garment District of St. Louis or just downtown Chicago for that matter. And how are buildings, how do they find their identities? And so I'm really excited that you're both here with us today to tell us more about it. How do you know where to start to name a business? Is it like naming a kid, naming a baby? Where does it all begin?
It starts with a conversation with the client, and it's a great initial discovery process, whether it's a ground up building, a standalone brand. We start by interviewing the client. We know that whatever the brand name will ultimately be, the essence of that name already lives in the mind of the entrepreneur who has come to us to build their brand. So we have a process where we ask pointed questions intended to inspire the client to get creative, have fun, and share the essence of the brand that already exists in their mind. They just don't know it. Yeah, so our branding niche is creating brands and brand experiences in the built environment. So we often have a head start because there is an existing building or a specific location involved in the naming. So after we get a general feel and direction from the client, we often head to the Missouri Historical Society or the St. Louis Public Library because they have awesome resources in both those places, and they're very helpful. But if it's not a historical address, we interview the client, we pull out some guiding principles that we establish at the start of the project as our sort of North Star for the naming. We create a brand strategy, and we use this as our base for inspiration and reasoning. And then we come together as a team and we do what we say. We throw spaghetti at the fridge. You know that phrase where you throw spaghetti at the fridge to see if it's done, to see which ideas stick. And it's really an incredible process. And to date, it has helped us generate many concepts for our clients. So we come up with different buckets of ideas, and then we break apart and we brainstorm ideas. We come back together and we narrow it down to some ideas we want to put in front of the client.
That's awesome. So Judy or James, tell me if it's an older building, this probably totally depends on your client, but I would think a lot of times maybe the name is going to reflect bits of its historic past, or are there times when it's more almost more of a futuristic name?
We've had both historic renovations as well as new ground up projects where the client did not want to have it reflect history. They want it to be very forward feeling. In those cases, we look to everything from our education, from different languages to art history to what we call a mashup, names that don't exist yet. But when you bring different words together, it comes up with a very sensical sounding name and is a unique name that applies to the guiding design principles that we set out with the client in the beginning of the project with. That makes sense.
James, once you have a name, then what do you do? Where does it go from there?
As Judy mentioned earlier on, those guiding principles are really important for us as we move through all the project phases. A lot of times we're not even getting into the visuals until we have a solid name concept and that brand strategy established at the beginning. We keep those guiding principles in mind and it's used as the guidepost throughout the project process. And then from there, we really begin that visual visioning discussion. We have a meeting with that client again to talk through about really thoughtful questions that are going to lead to some answers that start to lead to the visuals. And then we also do visual surveys, so pulling inspiration from competitors, from other innovative projects that we're seeing in the industry at the time, and pulling just a wide survey and then asking them to glean what they think aligns with their vision for this new brand. So then one thing that we also want to always focus on is the target audience. And this is sometimes a difficult thing for people on the client end to get past is it's not necessarily always about personal preferences, but it's really about what is the story that we're trying to tell for reaching that target audience and connecting to the neighborhood or to users or whoever is going to be interacting with that building and really being authentic to that story. So, with all that, the first round of the visual concepts, our team takes all that information, steps back, and starts to just brainstorm and sketch how all of that written content is going to come to life as a logo design and a brand identity. And then we meet with the client to review those initial concepts. Once the final concept is selected, sometimes there's one or two rounds in between. Then we focus on finalizing that design and building a really robust brand guidelines document that prepares the client for the road ahead, really bringing that building to life for any future implementations. And that can come through marketing collateral, the built environment, such as designing an exterior mural, which we love to do, any exterior signage that identifies the building for the public, etc.
That's so exciting. Are you guys okay just sharing some examples and that'll maybe help us see how these steps come to life in naming a structure?
We actually have a brand that's about to go live, timed with this podcast. We created this brand alongside our client, Oliver Properties. They had just finished renovating a building that is called currently the Lofts at 1000. And they needed a new brand because they're investing on updating the building and making it much more elevated as an experience, which Arcturis is doing the interior design for that as well. So we produced several themes for the name concepts at the beginning. We did research. We went to both the library and the historical society, found some amazing old periodicals and looked through that for some inspiration. The themes for this 1000 lofts at 1000, what was it called? It was the lofts at 1000. The themes were history, authenticity, and renewal. So we took those buckets and we came up several names for each. The property was once called the Merchandise Mart of St. Louis and was home to the Rice Sticks Dry Goods Company. One of the names under history came from the 1908 Rice Sticks catalog. We saw an advertisement for a new type of thread around 1908 because in the 1800s there was an embargo on silk. I think it has something to do with Napoleon. And entrepreneurs developed a new thread by twisting together 6 strands of cotton to mimic silk thread strength. This was called 6-cord thread and it was a highly touted new invention to replace silk. So we found that the story of binding together the cotton threads directly aligned with the brand essence of this property. They want this first property to weave together the downtown district and become a catalyst for change in the downtown area. And it will be called the 6-cord. And the client was smart to pick this name from our list of several because it was unique and exciting and it told a really unique story. We really loved the choice.
Were they really surprised? Did they have a grasp of some of the history to know about the background, or was it totally just a cool surprise for them?
They were, I think, very savvy marketers as well and understood something unique. This is not many clients would go with something, but it's a very unique name. So they absolutely knew the history of the building. Did they go to the history museum and look through all the catalogs? No, that was our job, but they hopped right on it.
I
And then
think
we developed the logo.
Yeah, and what's really cool about it is that while the name is rooted in history, you can assign a new meaning to it because not many people immediately know what the sixth chord is and where that came from. So that storytelling is really going to captivate people and bring them in and draw them to want to know more. So yeah, it was just a unique, fun choice.
I think it's fascinating. Did it just, when you got to the graphic design part of it, did it just bring forth a number of creative visuals and directions you could go?
Yeah, definitely. So we again established all of the brand positioning, all the verbiage, and then aligned that with the six chord brand as that was selected. And then from there, we developed a few contemporary marks that mirrored what they were working on in the interiors team, which was to really elevate the property, still celebrating the history, but bringing it into the contemporary elevated space. And we really closely collaborated throughout that design process with the interiors team. They were working simultaneously on selecting some of those finishes. So it became a really integrated, holistic brand experience.
Give folks an idea. I'm sure it depends on the specific project, but could this be months of creating this brand identity? Is it a year? Is it 2 months? How long? Because I would imagine it's a pretty in-depth process, like you said, the research of the history and just all the discussions with the owner.
I think we have some flexibility in terms of timelines. It really depends on how quickly we get through the initial visioning process and history in the beginning. Sometimes the design takes a little bit longer, going back and forth, making sure with the legal team that we're headed in the right direction when it's something unique. But yeah, if we're up against a deadline, I think that lights a fire under us to
Yeah.
make it happen more
With,
quickly and
with
efficiently.
with developers, they tend to want it pretty quickly. But like James said, it's important to us that we run an initial, or the client runs an initial knockout phase with a lawyer, because you don't want to name something that already exists. A lot of good names have already been taken. So it's really hard to name a baby. And so to actually leave a hospital with a name on the birth certificate, you have to take a leap of faith. And in most cases, we have built a compelling argument and presentation that they're on board with us by the time we get to yes. So it's a great experience when it works well, but it's a few months for sure.
And having those guiding principles at the beginning of the project that we've established and come to an agreement with the client of here's what the goals are for the project throughout the all of the design process. Having that is really helpful at the end to saying what we're delivering is meeting all of those needs, and that helps with the efficiency of the process
Yeah,
as
because
well.
they sometimes they need us, they hire us for our objectivity, our creativity, but also there's so much going on with these projects or the startup. We've named some brands before, and they've got so much as a startup, they don't have a name yet. So they've got a lot going on. So they look to us for leadership and clarity. And so by having these sort of emotional conversations about how they feel about the brand, and then using that as what, like I call our North Star, or as James says, guidepost, that really brings us back to what their intentions were, and it's helpful to help them tie up their whole package
You
or
know, I
sew it together with thread, as we say.
yeah, exactly, 6th chord.
Right.
As I interview people about projects, and I'll talk to the general contractor, the construction manager, and the architect, and I'll usually interview them when they're still building it. And I'm always really careful. Now, this kind of backing up, this makes sense to me to send them a draft if there's a little lag time because they may have this placeholder name for the project. And then it'll completely change. And so by the time it comes out, just like doubling back with whomever to make sure, is the name they gave me the name, or was it just a name that they have reserved till the real name pops up?
And so we love, thanks for bringing that up. We love to work at the onset, and our team, we're a collaborative studio. We always try and be a part of the initial conversations. And the developers get the value of that more and more, because you spend so much time establishing a brand, and then if you have to then go change it, it's taking a few steps back. So we love to be in it at the beginning.
Oh, I bet. We don't have a lot of extra time, but do you have another example you would want to share of a creative project that you named recently? What could be in St. Louis or really anywhere?
We did a brand identity. It wasn't tied specifically to just a building, but the Legacy Center was a great example of a recent project that we've completed. And they came to us with the name that they already had selected, but we got to build the full brand identity around it on the visual end. So that's a different process than what the first example was that we talked about, but assigning the proper meanings through using the visuals that create that meaningful visual for that brand name is just as important. And we got to have a lot of fun with that one. It was about empowering the kids that use the Legacy Center as a resource center in their community. And youth power was the tagline there.
What was really cool about this is the director, Dr. Terry Harris, came to us, and we have a continuum that we discuss with clients. Do you want to be credible, incredible, or radical brand? Dr. Harris got, he said, I want it to be radical. These are kids that need to experience life in a way that the rest of the community gets to. And I want this to be radical. I want to shake things up. And it was really great to work with him. And we've won several awards for that brand as well.
Mhm.
Oh, how wonderful. I think you might have a question for me.
So whenever we end a branding exercise, or we start a branding exercise, we always say, tell me 3 words that describe your brand. So Kerry, if you could give me 3 words that describe your podcast, what would they be?
Gosh, I'm always a little bit rambly and wordy, so this is a good challenge for me. I would probably say projects, people, and issues, meaning construction industry.
Great. Then I think Build St. Louis sounds like the perfect name for your podcast.
We did it right? Good, because that would have been some doing to change it.
Thank you. Good job.
Oh, thank you for the kudos because I didn't have the experts, but everyone listening, it's worth it, I think, to invest in the experts such as Arcturis, because gosh, hopefully that building is going to be standing for 100+ years to come. And I can see how important now branding identity really is. So we've been talking this episode with Judy Glick, Director of Brand and Client Engagement at Arcturis, and James Butler, who is the Design Practice Leader for Arcturis, which is an architecture and design firm in and much more in and around St. Louis. And if you're looking for a name, or if you want to name your baby, I might call them as well. Only that's probably, you probably wouldn't want to be in the middle of that. But we're so glad that you joined us today. Thank you, Judy, and thank you, James. And please come back and see us again on Build St. Louis.
Thank you so much.